welcome to UFOA Australia. Today we have a very special guest with us, and that's Brenda Butler. We're here to discuss her life and the events that have happened in her life, plus the many people and things that she's been able to help over the years. I'm just going to read you a very short brief about Brenda so you get a general idea about who Brenda Butler is, and you'll be able to understand a little bit more about where we're leading into with the interview. So Brenda is a qualified yoga teacher, clinical hypnotherapist, a Touch for Health instructor, and has trained in many other health modalities over the years. For 16 years, she worked in family violence as an educator and as a court support worker for women with financial or child access issues. For those who have had to apply for intervention orders. So Brenda's been very helpful in that respect to help people who have had a lot of problems in the family courts and so forth. She facilitated a support group and educational programs for women who were experiencing or had experienced sexual abuse issues and child access issues. For those who had to apply for intervention orders, so people who have had to apply for intervention orders in regards to sexual matters and child abuse and so forth, Brenda has been very much in the fore with that. She facilitated support groups and educational programs for women who were experiencing or who had experienced sexual abuse and family violence. So Brenda's been in the thick of this for a long time now, and her experience over the years obviously tells. So from this, she created the program called Moving On, which was designed to support women who suffered from what they call PTSD. Now that stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, and give them the tools and techniques to help them with their problems with PTSD. And it was during that time that when Brenda was at the age of 33, she had experienced severe flashbacks to childhood memories and abductions. So that's going to be very interesting to talk to Brenda about that. This forced her to reevaluate her life and everything she believed in. So her whole life had changed from that point. Her life was not what it appeared to be anymore. You know, things had changed because of this one event or many events. She soon realised that she would not get support from the general community, and we all know what that's like, folks, don't we? When we start talking about alien abduction and so forth like that, who the hell do you go to? Because there's nothing out there in the mainstream government facilities that offers this kind of support. And out of her own need and the wish to help others like herself, she started up a support group for alien abduction. So what we'll do now is we'll introduce Brenda, and we'll go through a series of questions and find out just a little bit more about Brenda Butler. Hello, Brenda.
Hi, Andrew.
How are you today?
Good, thank you.
That's good to hear. Now, I've got a bunch of questions here that we're going to ask you, and you'll feel free to talk about each one as we go through.
Okay.
I know this can be sometimes, for some people, it can be quite traumatic to talk about such events, but Brenda's a very brave lady, and she's here today to talk to us. So we'll start with the first question. What gave you the idea to start up this support group for alien abduction, and when did that actually occur?
It occurred in 1994. I was, as you said, I was running the family violence groups, and I was driving home from work one day after a support group and thinking a lot about how alone and isolated I felt with the whole abduction thing. And there was no one that I could talk to except for one person, and that was John Orcatel, the UFO researcher from Melbourne.
Yep.
It had taken me a long time to actually find him, and I would sometimes ring him up at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and he was wonderful. He'd stay on the phone for 2 hours with me, and I'd tell him things, and then I'd say, am I crazy? I must be crazy. And he would never respond and say, no, you're not, or anything like that. He just very calmly would put forward another case with the same thing that I'd just said in it. So it's like he was confirming for me that that had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate what he did for me in that time period, because I went through, I don't even remember now whether it was weeks or months. Like, the time is a blur. It was just such a shock to have to acknowledge that this had happened in my life. And I'd had 3 serious flashbacks over 3 years, and each time I had one, I would just block it out and say, oh, that can't be real.
Is that because it was traumatic for you?
No, just because I couldn't believe that anything like that could exist. It just wasn't in my world.
It's the reality of it, isn't it?
Yeah, it was just too hard to believe that there would be these strange looking creatures and coming and taking you out of your bed, and everything that goes with it. So I just thought, no, just forget about it. So I would just forget about it and go on, and then 12 months later, that's actually how it happened for 3 years. I'd have a flashback, I'd forget for 12 months, I'd have another one, forget, have another one, and then finally, after the last one, it actually occurred in a group counselling session, and I went into a state of like fetal on the floor, sweating, terrified, and the therapist said, look, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And
is that because they've never dealt with alien abduction before?
Yeah, she said to me afterwards, she got me to stay back from the group, and she said, do you know what happened to you? And I said, I think I have an idea of what might have happened. And she said, I've only ever seen that reaction once before in someone. She said, have you been abducted? And I just looked at her and said, I think I might have been. And she said, yeah, she said, I've seen exactly the same terror. She said, I've never seen it in anyone else before except you 2 people. And that person was an abductee. She said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. She said, it's too much for the group to expect to cope with it. And
that's probably because what their experiences were nothing like yours.
No, and she also said she didn't understand it. She didn't have a clue how to deal with it, so I'd have to leave the group. So I went away feeling really dejected and rejected, and then just got left with this overwhelming urge to have to find someone who I could talk to and who could possibly help me. And so that's where the journey began. With John Orcatel, I spoke to him for quite a few months, I think it was, before I thought about the idea of the support group. Towards that, at the time period when I did actually decide that that's what I wanted to do, it happened because of that day that I was driving home, and I was thinking about the women in the family violence group and how quickly they would move on with their lives and recover. They still suffered from post-traumatic stress and had all sorts of things to sort out in their lives, but the bonding that occurred in that group between these women, they no longer felt alone. They were able to function better in their lives. They didn't feel so isolated, even being back out with other people that didn't understand what they'd been through. They felt more a part of it then because they had this group of people that they could relate to.
So that gave them strength and I guess a connection between them, that they could talk to each other and understand it a bit better.
It gave them the strength to keep going and to be able to move on, and to know that someone else in the group was further along than they were. And that person was like a role model. So it's like, well, she could do it. She could get there, so I can. So I was just thinking about it on the drive home, and by the time I got home, I thought, that's what I need to do. I need to find some people who've been through this and that I can talk to, and that will help me and will also help them.
That's actually a very hard thing to do, though, because a lot of people don't like to talk about this publicly to anybody because, you know, they get ridiculed and made fun of, I guess.
Yeah, and I'd already had that experience in the couple of weeks after that event with the counsellor. I'd rung up different therapists and tried to get help, and I would get silence on the end of the phone, or you need to go to an institution, or laughed at. So it became really quite horrible. And in desperation, I think I looked up in the Yellow Pages or something for UFO something, and I found Keith Basterfield
Oh, yeah.
from Adelaide.
Yep.
And he was wonderful, and I rang him, and I said to him, you know, is there anyone local, because it's going to cost me a lot to keep ringing Adelaide.
Yeah. Yep.
So he said, look, I'll get right onto it, and he got back to me the next day, and with John Alcatel's number, and so John and I became this backwards forwards communication, which helped me amazingly. And that night when I got home after the support group, I said to him I wanted to start one. He told me about a man named Rob, someone in Sydney who had a support group running at the time. Can't remember his last name, Tillman or something. Anyway, he suggested I go to that and see, you know, how it all works. So I got on a train one Friday and went up to Sydney for the weekend and came home with a horrific backache. But anyway, I did it. I went to the group and met some people there who'd had experiences, was absolutely terrified and nervous.
Yep.
It turned out a really nice day. And came back and said to John, well, that's it, I'm going to do it. And he, at the time, he was doing Kelly Carhill's case.
Yep.
And so he said to me, look, as soon as I finish with Kelly, I'll introduce you both, and, you know, at least you'll have each other to talk to.
Yep.
So that happened. But in that time period, it was almost like as soon as I sort of put out and said, I want to do this, I don't know, it seemed like people came out of the woodwork, and I'd get told, oh, there's this person I think you need to meet. And before I knew it, within probably 2 or 3 months, there was enough of us to start a group.
Excellent, excellent.
So we started the group. Yeah.
So do you normally just help people from Melbourne, or is it like generalised around the Melbourne area, or do you help people from interstate as well?
I can help people, obviously, that are local easier because we can spend time together.
Yep.
But I do get phone calls from people interstate.
Okay.
I do get letters from people, and I've even had letters from overseas.
Right.
I also get like anonymous calls from people.
Yep.
And
that's actually a very common thing. We actually get, quite occasionally we'll get somebody ring and they say, I don't want to say who I am, but, you know, I've got something I want to talk to you about. And that quite often happens. So I'm sure with your group, the same thing would happen there.
Yeah, it did. I found that I would get someone who would be very resistant to wanting to say much at all. It's like they test you out. And because I've gone through it, I can then help them to relax by sharing bits of my story with them, and then they start to open up a bit more. And usually by the end of the conversation, an hour or 2 hours later, they're just
can't get enough out quick enough.
Yeah. And their whole attitude changes. Like, they can often start off sounding quite crazy almost, or disturbed, you know, and by the time they've been talking for a while, that all drops away, and they just...
Do you think that is because they're nervous to talk to somebody they haven't met before? Do you think it's because of that, or do you think it's because they've probably already been ridiculed by other people anyway, and now they're feeling like, you know, is this the right thing to open up again, sort of thing? Do you think that might be why they start off like that?
I think it's all that, but I also think for some of them it's because they've never told anyone.
Okay.
And that I can be the first person they've spoken to, and they're terrified to even... Because when you talk about something, it becomes more real. That's the other thing. Me sitting here talking openly to you brings the realness back again, you know. When you don't talk about it, you can sort of make it disappear a bit,
put it to
or
the back of your mind,
pretend it's not real. But when you actually talk about it, it's very real. So you're sort of left with having to deal with that, and that's probably the most difficult part, I think, for these people is to open their mouth for the first time when they never have, and to not know how they're going to be received, to not know whether are you thinking I'm crazy, you know, am I crazy? Like the things that go through your head, you feel crazy.
Because, you know, at the end of the day, this is not a tangible thing. This is not like, you know, like an abuse thing at home, for example, where you know the person that's done the abuse. In this particular case, folks, we don't actually know who this is or what it is that's actually done the abuse to you. So, you know, alien abduction, people laugh about it, people make a lot of jokes about it, but wait till it happens to you. You won't laugh, and you'll be looking for help. So, you know, the likes of Brenda, those sort of people, they're like gold. They're hard to find. There's not a lot out there, but if you can get in contact with someone like Brenda, if you are having experiences, or if you've been through an experience and having trouble dealing with it, then I highly recommend that you would contact Brenda, because she will be able to help you in some way.
Even if it is just to say, look, I understand and I can support you, you know, through it.
Just the other question I was going to ask was, do you do home visits? Like, would you go to somebody's home?
I have been to people's homes. It's not something that I do a lot. That usually comes around when we sort of become friends. Usually the way that it occurs is over the phone, or through letters first. So we'll have contact through letter and then through the phone.
This is just initially, yeah?
Yep.
Yep.
And then if the person feels comfortable and wants to, then we'll meet somewhere. So we'll usually go to a cafe, and I'll usually pick one that I know where there's not a lot of people, so you're not being overheard in what you're saying.
Yep.
But it's comfortable enough for the person to relax and feel at ease with me.
Yep.
So we'll meet somewhere and we'll have a cuppa, and that way they get to know who I am, and they can ask me any questions they want, and we just share, basically. And after that, if the person's ready, then we might take it a step further, and it might be that they have some hypnosis because they want to know a little bit more about what's happened to them. I find the majority of people don't want hypnosis, or they might have 1 or 2 hypnosis sessions.
Is that the same as regression?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Just wanted to clarify that for the folks out there.
Yeah. It's to get into, you know, memories that are held inside them that they're not conscious of. So,
okay. Yep.
And it can be done in a form of regression without hypnosis, and I have done that with people.
Okay.
So, yeah. So there's that, and then usually from there, if it feels appropriate, then I might say to them, would you like to come to the group meeting? Usually by that time they've said to me, look, you know, I want to meet other people, and you know.
So maybe we talk a little bit about the group now, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about how the group operates. Do you meet in a central place? Do you use the people in the group as self-support for each other, and just generally how the whole operation works, as far as do you meet once a week, that sort of thing?
Okay. When we first started up, which is now 17 years ago, we were getting together once a month.
Yep.
Every Sunday afternoon, everyone would bring a plate, we'd have a shared lunch, and we do that to break down any barriers, anyone feeling nervous. If there was a new person that came, it would just help them relax, because they could just sit around, chat about anything. It didn't even have to be anything to do with the abduction stuff.
Yep.
And just generally get to meet other members of the group. So we would have our lunch. That would usually be a couple of hours, and then we would have what we call a meeting. And so the meeting, we'd all sort of come in the lounge room. The meetings were always at my place. I did try to delegate at times to different members of the group, but it didn't tend to work very well, so it sort of stayed on my shoulders, but that's okay. So we would start our meeting, and it would start with a sharing. Just everyone would generally get to share something about what's happened to them, who they are, why they're here.
So you go around the group?
Yep. Then after we did that, we would usually do something else, like someone might ask a question, oh, gee, why do you think that happened? So then we might get into some full-on discussion, like, yeah, I wonder why they do that or that, and then everyone would put their ideas in. Or
so there's a lot of feedback from each other going on.
Yeah, and oh, does that happen to you, or do you have that happen? You know, so we would share. There goes the phone. We would share different things like that. So we share, and we might do, like, one week we might do something like, okay, everybody, here's a bit of paper. Let's see what symbols you remember. What symbols do you draw all the time? So then we'll do that, and then we'll share.
Is that a common thing?
Oh, yeah.
People sitting down and does that? I'm just wondering now. Is that a conscious thing? Is it something like you're doing something and you go, oh, I've got to draw something down? Is that what happens?
I found when I was younger, I used to do it a lot when I was on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be sitting there doodling. But I'd be doing things like drawing triangles within circles.
But not consciously knowing it.
No, okay. I'd get off the phone at the end and I'd find that I'd drawn these different symbols, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. What's that all about? So I'm presuming that the symbols come up, well, now that I have some conscious memory, because you see them on the craft.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, it's just coming out of your unconscious mind, these bits of memories.
Yeah, yeah.
So we would do things like that. We would have a lot of fun together too. We make up jokes together about it at times. Every year we have a barbecue and picnic for Christmas. That's our sort of Christmas break-up. Some of the members from that time period have now moved and gone interstate, so our original group isn't together anymore, but we will always be together because we share something so intimate. We're all close friends, and that's the beauty of it. We have this bond that really no one can break, because we all care about each other. Everyone is loving and kind to each other. We don't have conflicts within the group. There's an acceptance with everyone, you know, of each other and our different viewpoints about it, because the reality is none of us knows exactly what's going on. Yeah. We all have thoughts and ideas about it, and the differences are important to have, you know.
It sounds like it's a pretty light-hearted group, but I mean, there must be some times when things get a little bit heavy for somebody and they might break down in tears. And what happens in that situation, Brenda? Do you stop the group from, do you kind of put a hold on it for a second while you deal with that?
We usually follow through and allow the person to share what they need to and feel what they need to. Okay. I have a strong background in rebirthing and primal therapy, so I'm very used to people's emotions and had a lot of counselling over the years. So grief to me is something that's very natural and normal, and part of our group agreements is to allow people to have their feelings, whatever they may be. And I think everyone is understanding, because we're all going through the same thing enough to really want to be there and support those who are maybe new to it and really struggling with it. The group has been fantastic for me at times when I've come in or I've been really angry about something I've found out about what's happened to me, or been really depressed when I found out something, and to be in the group and share that and have the support has made the world a difference.
And what about the connection with your group and other groups? Is there a connection with other groups, and are those other groups alien abduction groups similar to what you're dealing with, and do you help them at all in any way, or do they help you?
I don't know of any other support groups around locally. George Simpson has been a good support, and he's been at our meetings at times himself, supporting our group members.
See, there you go.
Sorry, I lost it then.
That's okay.
The arm came in.
That's okay. See, there you go, folks. It's what I said to you before. There is very few people around that help out in the support of alien abduction. Brenda's group is leading the way. There's not too many out there, and you can see by my question to Brenda, there isn't anybody out there that can help out. There's the individual people here and there, but as far as groups go, Brenda is probably the main group in Victoria for this sort of thing.
I did try to bring therapists, good quality therapists, into the group at times. I left it up to the group to decide whether they felt the person was appropriate, so that therapist would come for that group, and then they would all give me feedback as to how they felt about the person and their motive and everything for being there. There was one therapist that we all really liked and would have liked to continue, but that person was struggling with the whole idea of it. And this
is it because they hadn't been involved with alien abduction before? Like people
they just found it really impossible to believe, and so it was that there must be something else that's happened to all of us rather than that being the thing. Even though that person could see that we were all quite sane, and we weren't, liars. We weren't trying to make something up or anything.
It was the concept.
It was just too hard to take on board. And maybe if it had been a group that was sort of sharing something nicer, they probably could cope with it. But because, we were looking at some pretty dark and nasty things that have happened to us, it was much harder for this person to handle. And I think with therapists, the type of therapists that we need working in this field are the ones who can handle the dark. They're the ones who work with family violence, who work with child sexual abuse, who work with cult abuse, all the areas that generally are no to talk about, and people don't want to know about it because it's yuck and it's awful. They're the type of therapists we need, the ones who aren't afraid to do the hard miles.
Okay, so hear that, folks. If there's anybody out there who's a therapist, you've heard what Brenda's had to say, please contact her and help out, because you're the sort of people that we're looking for to help with Brenda and so many people out there who are suffering with this abduction situation. So,
and I've had some good backup from different therapists overseas who are very involved in the abduction work, and that's Eve Lorgan is one of them. She's been a wonderful support to me at times when I've wanted to give up.
Whereabouts is Eve from?
Eve's from America.
Okay.
And she's written a book called The Love Bite.
Okay.
And that talks about how alien intervention in human relationships and putting people together for specific reasons. She's been absolutely wonderful and helped me hang in there when it's been really hard going, so thank you, Eve, if you ever get to see this. As I said, George Simpson has been a wonderful friend with all of this. Bud Hopkins also, who all of us are going to miss dearly.
That was a sad day when Bud passed away.
Very sad.
And you knew Bud, didn't you?
Yep. I rang him quite a few times over a period of months a few years ago when I was really struggling with some of the things that were coming up. I would have people approach me who would say, you need to come and listen to this channeling. So I'd go and listen to it, and the channeling would be about how the aliens are no longer allowed to come to Earth, and they're not allowed to abduct anyone anymore, and it's all over and stuff like this. And I'd sort of walk out of there saying, well, that's interesting because I know someone it just happened to, and So that sort of thing would go on. Or I'd have people that would say, oh wow, I wish it would happen to me. And I'd say, be careful what you wish for.
People seem to think it's a big joke, and it's all going to be a good ride, but it's not a good ride at all for a lot of people, believe me.
Well, what I'd say to him is, so would you just get in the car with anyone you don't know? Hitchhiking? No. I said, well, same thing. You don't know them from a bar of soap. How do you know what these beings are like, whether they're going to be kind or harm you? You don't know. As
we were talking about earlier, it's the situation where you're taught from a young age that not to talk to strangers, and this is no different, guys. This is exactly the same thing. We're dealing with strangers. Doesn't matter where they're from, they're still strangers.
And the other one I would get from people, and this was in the field, is that it's a good thing that's happening. And when I had that sort of thing said to me, I just felt abused all over again, and it would just break me. It was just horrible to have someone actually saying that what's happened to you is a good thing. Or you walk into a shop and there's pictures of these creatures, you know, or little statues, or even, I can remember even seeing a kid's pencil sharpener with a little grey image on it.
Do you think they're trying to condition us?
Absolutely, make it normal.
Yeah.
But what they don't realise, and that's because people don't believe in it really, they don't really believe this is going on. They don't realise they're abusing you. So there's no blame in this. It's just the fact that they can't understand that this is a real thing. It would be like if I'd been sexually abused by my grandfather and every shop I went into there was a statue or a picture of him there.
Yeah.
You know? It's exactly the same thing.
It's like the instant reminder every time you see it.
Yeah. Or you see it in the movies and the shows on TV and they make these jokes about them, and all of it is just to turn it into one massive joke. I mean, you don't hear jokes being made about children who've been sexually abused.
Absolutely not.
But you hear it all the time. So it's to desensitise everyone. It's to desensitise us from what's even happened to us. So it's like when you hear that all the time, you start to put a shell around you. It's like, well, I'm not actually supposed to really feel how I feel about this. I've actually got to pretend
that it's a funny thing.
Yeah, that it's funny and I'm okay and you know, it hasn't really affected me. And so you start to create this wall around you that protects you from the actual trauma of what's happened to you.
Yeah, you kind of, you've got that other part of your life that you close the doors to just to keep it out the way.
Yeah.
The other question I was going to ask you was how do people contact you? Because I guess at this point of the interview it would be nice to know what methods there are available. I know you're on our website, but what other methods, or if you want to mention our website, that's fine too, but what other methods are there available for someone out there who would really like to contact you and talk to you about an experience that they've had?
It's usually been word of mouth over the years, because this is the first time I suppose I'm really going out there publicly. And
thank you for that.
Yeah, it's been usually word of mouth or different people have had. I did at one stage many years ago make up a brochure and gave it around to a few people, and it had my email address on it, and that's part of the apology actually on your website, because the old email address that they had never got changed to my new one, so that was wrong.
Yeah, but that's corrected now.
Thank goodness. yeah. So usually I prefer people to contact me by email first, if they can, or by phone contact, and then from there we sort of work out what we're going to do. Because, okay, the majority of people that I speak to are average normal people, but you do occasionally get some that aren't stable, and it doesn't mean that there's not unstable people in this area. There are, and that can be caused from abduction, that they become drug addicts or alcoholics or you know, end up with a mental illness. But at the same time there are others that are not involved in it, and I can usually pick the difference between the ones who are a part of it and the ones who aren't. So
do you want to maybe just give us your email address out?
My other email address.
Yeah, the correct one.
Okay, it's Brenda B. So it's BrendaBee. That came out of, I used to have beehives.
Okay.
Yeah. So Brenda B at iprimus.com.au.
Okay, can we have that one more time?
Brenda B at iprimus.com.au.
Okay, so there you go, folks. And if you still want to know a little bit more, you can find Brenda on the VUFOA website. That's www.vufoa.com. Go to the Seeking Help page and you'll find Brenda, the last one on the list there. And if you wish to contact her, you can also email her through the website, through the contacts page on the website. So that'll be very handy for a lot of people out there, I'm sure.